What's up guys, it's Joey. Welcome back to my channel. So as you can see from the title, today we're going to be talking about one of my biggest adventures of my entire life, my time living in Africa. So I haven't really discussed it much on this channel because it did happen a couple years ago, but it was a huge chunk of time. It's actually the longest I've ever spent out of the States in a single area. But I spent a year living in West Africa in the country of Liberia, part of the Peace Corps, which is an organization from the United States that goes and offers resources and teachers or healthcare workers and things like that to go help out in other countries as volunteers. This video would be hours long if I talked about everything that went on there. So I kind of wanted to break it up and focus on different little parts. My whole job and like teaching in Africa and being in the classrooms and being a volunteer in a Peace Corps, and I'm gonna save till the next video. So if you're interested in that, definitely look out for that because that is gonna be a whole different perspective of like, I mean, what it is like to actually work there and be in the school systems and things like that. For this one right here, we're gonna be focusing on what it was like as an American living in West Africa for a full year. All right, so first to dive right in, I want to give you guys kind of a background on the country of Liberia. And the first thing probably a lot of you guys are wondering is where the heck is this country? Myself, when I was selected for the service there, I had no idea where it was. And then a lot of people confuse it with Libya and different types of countries all over the place. I'm actually gonna show you on my map over here. So I have a map in my room of all the different countries I've been to. Liberia is this little one right here. So it is right next to Ivory Coast and Sierra Leone and Guinea. It is on the coast right here, just north of the equator, and the Sahara is all this right here. So it's one of those countries that's not quite down so far to get into like the jungle and rainforest part of Africa, but below the desert. Ooh, let me go turn that lamp back on. So a little bit of history about the country. It was actually formed from the freed slaves of the Americas. They were moved back into and set free in Liberia, and that's why it is called Liberia. It's for liberty and the freed slaves. Because of this, the national language is English. So when going there, people do speak a form of English. It is not the English that you or I would use or that they use in England or anything. I mean, everywhere has a little bit of a different dialect. Liberian English is almost to the point of being a separate language. I mean, there's so many different words, different sounds and everything, but it's based off of traditional standard English.
The one I get mad with, that so-called big Jew, she get me mad on business. That nonsense you're coming to me, come and tell me what? Eh?
When you came, that horse where you used to carry your dating into, that was my own horse.
Now I go to see my family, that's my problem.
Americans say, she told on you. Liberians say, she finished running cheche pole on you.
And then I think the next big question people will have is like, kind of, what was it like? What was the landscape? Were there like massive animals and stuff? And so West Africa is not what people think of when they think of Africa. Most people would think of like wide open plains, grasslands, I mean lions, elephants, giraffes, zebras. None of those big animals really live up there in West Africa. For the most part, it is smaller animals. We did have quite a bit of monkeys, and then one of my favorites, the pangolin, which is one of the most endangered species out there. I had one little guy that loved my house, and my neighbor kids brought him over for me, and he chilled out for a while until I sent him back into the trees. Not the African animals you expect, because those are all down more in East and South Africa. And then also we were along the coast. So almost like the entire country is along this coast. And so like my house was right on the beach, and a lot of different volunteers lived and went to the beach pretty much every day. I mean, I know I could probably count on one hand the number of days I didn't go to the beach. And that was just when I like really wasn't feeling well or traveling or something like that. But the beach is definitely one of the most beautiful places. There's no real like touristy beach areas. So all of it's just like natural, mile long, endless as far as you can see, pristine beaches, which is awesome and amazing and one of my favorite parts about the country. But yeah, it's not really what you expect with the grassy plains because it's mainly like a tropical forest, not so much jungle as like big canopy and everything. It doesn't really have that. It's more just, we call it the bush because it's just kind of like a tropical forest with like, I don't know, not that many big animals or anything. I didn't expect the country to be so green because in Africa we think of desert and like the savanna, like the grassy plains. So Liberia is one of the poorer countries that the Peace Corps serves in, and they've had a rough couple of decades the past probably 30 or so years. They had a really big civil war that dates back into the 90s and early 2000s. So not that long ago, it kind of wiped out the country. People were fleeing the country. There was multiple coups over and over again with the government, but it has created this kind of infrastructure problem where there's no more running water or electricity and buildings are decrepit. So it has a little bit of an interesting look because of that. And then also, as some of you will remember, Ebola, Liberia was a hotspot for that in West Africa. So they came out of the Civil War and then went straight into Ebola. And we were one of the first groups back. So there was another group that was about halfway through their service, then we came in. So we were kind of that first group to see like picking it back up from the ground. So it's very sad now with COVID because the Peace Corps has pulled out again from the entire world, which is a huge deal. Leaving again and just everything that's going on now, they keep on kind of getting hit with stuff. It's definitely an interesting perspective living in that type of country because one of the most impoverished nations of Africa and one of the like hardest hit recently places to be in the world. So yeah, it was different for sure. So there was a lot of dark history there that has since reshaped the whole kind of country into being very, very kind. You will never see guns or anything like that anymore, and everybody is trying to help each other out. So now that you kind of have a little bit of a backstory on Liberia and what the country is like and kind of what we were walking into as becoming volunteers there, next I'm going to talk about how the government was structured. So since of the close ties with America, it was actually very, very similar to an American government. In a sense, they had the president and the senators, and the Constitution was almost identical to the American one because it was basically modeled after that, like taken from the States and then applied to this country in Africa. And for better or worse, that's kind of how they ran things there. So they also used American money. They had the Liberian dollar and then the US dollar, which would constantly be exchanged between the two. About 120 Liberian dollars equals 1 US dollar. And the lowest denomination was 5 Liberian dollars, which is about 3 cents. And for example, like if I went to the market, I could buy my groceries for about 50 Liberian dollars a day, which is like 30 cents. So it is a very cheap country to live. Very, very cheap. Though we're talking about food and stuff, I kind of want to go into my actual experience because this has kind of been a general background of it. I mean, and you could dive in so much to it and there's so much different resources you could pull from, but that was about as brief as I can make it. Now that I brought up the market, I guess the natural thing to go into now is food because that's what everybody is always curious. What did I eat? What was available? What did the people eat there? All that kind of stuff. So next we're gonna go into food. So the first thing is I kind of want to describe a typical Liberian dish. So the way food works in Liberia is it's almost always a pot of rice and a pot of soup. That will be your meal every single day of the week. And normally it's gonna be a big pot of rice and a little bit of soup. So predominantly, I would say about 70% of everybody's food is rice. That's the primary food group for everybody. And then the soup is not what we would call soup. It's not like a liquid soup. It's more like I would say a sauce. It's pretty much the consistency of sauce. And they had a couple different ones that they would rotate through. Basically your greens, which were cassava leaf, water greens, potato greens, okra, and you slash those up and then it's fried in oil. It's not the most healthy, even though you're thinking greens. It's basically just sopped up oil with rice. So there's not much nutrients there. The other types of soup, my personal 2 favorites were pumpkin soup, which is pretty similar to butternut squash. So you are gonna boil that until it kind of gets into a mushy consistency and then add your spices and seasonings. And that one was always pretty good. I like that one a lot. And then my favorite though is this thing called palm butter. So this is not something I've ever heard of. I've never seen it anywhere else in the world. I think it's either a Liberian or maybe West African specialty in itself. Essentially what you do is you take the like little seeds of a palm nut. I'll put something here to show you what I'm talking about, but they're like red and black and yellow, and you boil them. Also, before we get to any of that, there's no electricity, so you don't have a stove or anything. So what people do is we have a coal pot, and essentially you put your coals on top, you light a fire, and that takes, I mean, 20-30 minutes just to get going enough to cook anything. So that's a process already. And then once you have that, you've got your coal pot cooking, you're gonna boil these nuts. You take those nuts and then you put them into a, what is that thing called? Like a giant mortar and pestle. So then you start hitting them with this massive stick and breaking the husk off the nut. So imagine like getting a coconut, the husk off a coconut, but they're much smaller. After that, once you have those husks, then you're gonna put it back in the water and you're gonna boil it again, and then you're gonna take it out again and hit them again until you've got all the husks off and you can start removing the black little like pits, and you get those gone. But then they call it scranging. It's basically like squish as you would like if you're wringing out laundry essentially, and you squeeze the husks until the yellow liquid comes out, which that will later turn into like more of a consistent thing, but at first it just kind of looks like yellow water. So you're gonna squish that all, and then you put it back in the thing, and you hit it all again, and then you squish it again, and then you finally get kind of a pot full of yellow liquid. And it seems like this is just water, that your whole meal is just gonna be water. But you then put that back on the fire and put it on for about 2 hours or so, and then eventually all that liquid will come off and you'll get mush. Looked it up, it's mainly just fat because that's kind of what nuts are, but it's super, super good. So you cook it with a bunch of pepper. That's how Liberians cook. It's very, very spicy. Now coming back to the States, I can do the hot wing challenge anywhere we go. Everywhere I go, like with my friends or something, I'll eat something and I'll be like, oh yeah, there's no spice at all. And they will be like crying. There's nowhere in the world that has spice that compares to Africa, I don't believe. I mean, I've eaten some really spicy, authentic Indian. I've lived in South America and eaten their spice, and it just doesn't compare. It literally burned off my taste buds. I mean, it is insane. When you first start, you just can't even eat or feel anything. But then over time you get used to it, and then finally like your neighbors will start adding more spice, or they'll put more in your meal, and you just kind of work up your tolerance to the point that you can actually eat like them. Because when you first get there, there's no way you can. I mean, you will be sick because of how spicy it is. I never really cooked with meat, and a lot of volunteers didn't, just because it's not the most sanitary. The meat that you buy, it's gonna be just kind of from a table at the market, and there's flies going on and stuff. And I know it's probably okay. I can never do it. I can never cook it myself. I ate anything that was given to me. Anything, anytime anybody would bring to me, it was delicious and I loved it. But I don't trust my own cooking enough to know that that's gonna be okay for me to eat. When we first got there, me and my friend made the pact of like, we're never gonna turn anything down. Whatever they give us, we're gonna eat. And we ate some weird stuff. A lot of times you just had to like, just not think about it. I mean, they would tell me it was a chicken and the bone would be like that big. And I'm just like, that's not chicken. They basically classified everything as either fish, chicken, or meat. And you never really knew what that was gonna be if they said meat. You know, it could be anything. I mean, I don't wanna get too gruesome, but yeah, like definitely dogs and cats. And I ate python, and I think a pangolin, and deer, and it could be literally anything. But that's kind of the way of life out there. I mean, that's reality for a lot of the world, because it's not like here. There are no grocery stores, there's no electricity, so there's no refrigerators. So that means like goodbye to dairy as a whole food group. I mean, there's no milk, there's no cheese, no yogurt, anything like that. Anything that needs to be refrigerated, just count that out. Everything you're gonna eat that day, you buy in the market that day. So if I was gonna cook something different than a Liberian dish though, I did a lot of, you could get these boxes of falafel actually in the market, in the like actual market in the capital, which was 8 hours away from my house. So whenever I would go there, I would like stock up and buy like the whole shelf and then bring that back to my site, because those are really, really good and a good source of protein since we weren't eating much meat. We could do things like empanadas or tacos, pastas and stuff like that. A lot of beans and chili. Chili was a big one. Just whatever you can kind of cook that's gonna be able to cook on a fire. I mean, that's kind of what it boils down to. You're not gonna be doing any fancy gourmet meals, and you can't save anything, so it's also gotta kind of be a quick meal that is gonna get eaten. You can't cook too much. I did absolutely love cooking with my neighbors though, because in Liberia, the men don't really ever cook. So they thought it was so funny that I cooked. Everybody would walk by and they just be, oh, Joseph's cooking. And they would just kind of like watch me while I cooked. Like, and they would at first, they would totally try and correct everything, because they'd be like, no, you have to do this, you have to do this. Oh, you're burning it. Oh, and then trying to get me to like, oh, you should put some fish heads or put some of this meat. And I'd just be like, no, I'm okay, I promise, it's good. But after a while, they just kind of like, found it comical, the meals I would make, because it's not their way of doing things. In the same way as if they came here and they cooked a meal, we would think it's strange. So they definitely like thought it was hilarious, and they thought I was probably the worst cook ever. But it was really cool just because, I don't know, it challenges their gender roles and like a little bit of the concepts there, which was always nice. The other big thing with food was like what's actually available. There's no like refrigeration or mass distribution or anything. It's just kind of whatever is grown in your village, and that is constantly changing. When I first got there, it was pineapple and avocado every day, that would be your snack. There would be so many pineapples, so many avocados. And I love that because those are two of my favorite fruits. That was in about June. And then in August, all of a sudden there's no pineapple, no avocado, and there's just cucumbers everywhere. And you're gonna eat cucumbers every single day for the next 3 months. And then after that, it went to oranges every day. That's it. And so you kind of just like eat something until you're sick of it. And then all of a sudden there's no more left and you have to eat something else and you kind of miss whatever it was before that. After oranges, it went to bananas, and then it went to mangoes, and then it went back to pineapple and avocado. So there was definitely months that were better. I mean, cucumber season is just like, sucks because those don't have any substance, and I don't know, it's not a fruit, but that's gonna be the only vegetable you get. There's no veggies really at all there. I kind of lost dairy, I lost meat, I lost veggies. I was kind of just eating grains and fruit. That's about it. I added 25 pounds while I was in Africa, which is like weird. You wouldn't think that's gonna happen, but then when you kind of hear the diet of like every day you're eating rice and something soaked and fried in oil. But yeah, it's definitely contrary to what you would think because of the diet. I thought it was really fun learning to cook there and learning to cook on the open flame, and all of my neighbors were super helpful, and they're just trying to like work with you and do things and have a good time. And my back porch connected pretty much to my neighbor's front porch. So we would all cook together, and meals are big family time for Liberians. And so everybody would be there gathered around, and like, I don't know, you're just sitting and talking, and meals were one of my favorite points for sure. All right guys, so I'm editing this video and it is getting a little bit long, so I think I'm gonna end it here, but there's still a lot more to come in the next one, talking about kind of traveling around the country, what my house was like living there, the clothing, and also I have a special guest coming to join me, talking about her time visiting me in Africa. So it's still a lot more and I'm very excited for it, but for this one, leave a like, comment down below, maybe something I talked about you didn't expect. Look out for that next one, make sure to subscribe, and goodbye. So I lived right here in Riversess, down here. So it took me about 8 hours to get to there. This is more the formal traditional African style, Liberian style. So with the embroidered design, it's a bit bigger of a shirt. So I want her to talk a little bit about her experiences, and so I will go get her now and be back in a second.